Seraphine Vale had learned a long time ago that the cold did not kill you. It was the silence after the gates shut that did it. She stood outside the walls of Ironwood packed territory on a January night, wearing a thin gray coat and carrying nothing except a small cloth bag and the memory of 9 chips on a loose courtyard stone. The gates were closed. The torches on the wall were already moving away, their light pulling back like breath held and then released. Nobody looked down, not even once. She walked. She did not count the steps. She did not cry. She did not look back at the walls, which grew smaller behind her, the way bad dreams always did, slowly, and then all at once, until she turned a ridge, and they were simply gone. What she thought about, strangely, was tea. She had left a mug of it on the windowsill of her healer's room that morning, before she knew what the evening would bring. She had been planning to drink it after her rounds. It would be stone cold now, sitting there, getting colder, and nobody would think to pour it out for at least 3 days, because nobody in Ironwood had ever thought much about what Seraphine Vale was in the middle of doing. That, more than anything, was the thing she carried out through those gates with her. Not the humiliation of kneeling in the dirt, not the sound of the beta's voice reading her verdict in that flat, practiced tone, the way someone reads a list of grocery items. Not even the moment King Zael Draven, newly crowned, 26 years old, already standing like a man who had never once been wrong about anything, had looked at her at the very end, for exactly 2 seconds, and then looked away. Just the tea, getting cold, nobody pouring it out. She walked through the night and into the next morning, and somewhere in the frozen border territory between Ironwood and the Hollow clans, a woman named Vera found her sitting against a tree and eating snow because she had run out of things to drink. Vera said, very practically, that this was not a good strategy. Seraphine said she was aware of that. Vera said she had a fire and a pot of something hot, and that she was not going to leave a girl in the snow, so Seraphine could either come along or sit there being stubborn, and either way Vera was going to feel terrible about it. Seraphine came along. That was the beginning of the 3 years that changed everything. So, the Hollow Healers were not what most packs imagined when they heard the name. People who had never met them pictured mysterious women in dark robes doing suspicious things with roots and smoke. The reality was a group of extremely practical, slightly sharp-tongued women who believed strongly in good record-keeping, adequate sleep, and the idea that omega resonance was not a defect in the system, but the part of the system that most people had simply been too afraid to learn. Seraphine learned. She had always been a good healer. She had known that about herself even when everyone in Ironwood was telling her she was too soft, too erratic, too much of a secondary nature, and not enough of anything primary. What she had not known was that what they called erratic was actually sensitivity, a fineness of perception that let her feel a pack's resonance, the way a good musician hears a room's acoustics before playing a single note. The Hollow Healers gave her the language for it. Then they gave her the technique. Then they stepped back and watched what she did with it. And what she did with it was extraordinary enough that they stopped calling her apprentice after 8 months and started introducing her by name to everyone who came through. She negotiated a border ceasefire in her 2nd year. 2 clans who had been bleeding each other for 6 seasons. She sat at the table between them, said almost nothing for 4 hours, and then spoke for 20 minutes with such precise knowledge of both bloodlines and both grievances that the room went quiet in a way that was different from ordinary quiet. It was the quiet of people hearing something true for the first time. The clans signed the agreement. Vera cried a little, privately, in the back corridor. Seraphine drank her tea while it was still hot. She did not think about Ironwood. Or she tried not to, which was mostly the same thing, except for the moments right before sleep, when the cold came back. And the silence after the gates, and 9 chips on a stone, she still could not stop counting even in her own memory. Those moments she had learned to let exist without fighting them. She sat with them the way you sit with a difficult patient, present, steady, not trying to fix what was not yours to fix. She was, she told herself, fine. She was building something. She had direction. She had work that mattered, and people who saw her clearly, and a room with good light, and a window that looked out over the ridge where the sunrise came early. She had, against all reasonable expectation, made a life worth living, in the exact territory that was supposed to have finished her. The border clans started calling her the Hollow Queen. She told them to stop. They didn't. The morning King Zael Draven rode into the Hollow Hall's courtyard, Seraphine was in the middle of treating a fever patient and did not come out for 40 minutes. She knew who it was. Vera had appeared at the door of the treatment room with an expression that combined apology, alarm, and something that might have been private satisfaction, and had said, very carefully, that there was an Alpha King in the front receiving room and that he had come alone, without a guard unit, which probably meant something. Seraphine finished the treatment. She washed her hands. She changed into clean gray linen because her working clothes had medicine on them, and she pinned her hair because it was in her face, and she thought about what she was about to walk into with a great deal of calm clarity, which she knew from experience was what her body did instead of panic. She walked into the receiving room. He was standing near the window, not sitting, which told her immediately that he was nervous. People who were comfortable sat down. People who needed to appear in control of a situation they did not control stayed on their feet and moved toward the light source. He looked older than she remembered. Not badly. 3 years had done something to his face that made it more honest. Or maybe she had just never looked at him that carefully before, because she had always been looking slightly away, which was the habit of someone who had learned not to want things from people with the power to take them. He looked at her, and she watched him recalibrate. She knew what he had been expecting. Someone diminished, someone cracked and sharp from 3 winters outside the gate, carrying all of it visibly on her face. Someone who would make this easier for him by appearing to have suffered enough that the balance sheet felt even. She was wearing clean gray linen, and her hands were steady, and her eyes were the same color as the ridge through the window, and she looked at him the way she looked at all incoming cases, assessing, neutral, already several steps ahead. He said her name. His voice was careful. She said, "Name your terms." Not yes, not no, not any of the several things she could feel sitting behind her teeth that would have felt good to say, and done absolutely nothing useful. Terms. She had learned, in 3 years, that clarity was the only real weapon, and she intended to use every bit of it. He told her about the sickness, a resonance failure moving through the pack, something that had been building for months, affecting the youngest and the oldest first, a kind of collective dimming. His healers had done everything they could. 3 different specialists had come and gone. Someone, eventually, had said the name Seraphine Vale, and he had already known it was coming before they said it, and he had ridden here himself because, he said this carefully, because he thought some things should not be done through letters. She listened to all of it. Then she named her conditions. Full access to all patients. No interference from his healers in her methods. Her own accommodations separate from the pack quarters, and a written agreement stating that her presence as a healer carried no obligation of any other kind. He agreed to all of them immediately. She said she would leave in the morning. She went back to her patient. Ironwood looked exactly the same. This was the thing nobody told you about returning to a place that had broken you, that it would be exactly the same and you would be entirely different, and that combination was stranger and harder than if one of the two had changed. The same stone walls, the same torches, the same smell of pine and fire and cold mountain air. The beta who had read her verdict was standing near the gate when she rode in, and he held himself very straight and said her name, with a formality so stiff it was almost painful to watch. She thanked him and moved past. The courtyard. She had known it was coming. She had told herself in the saddle for the last hour that it was just a courtyard. Stone and torches and cold ground. It did not have meaning. She was the one who assigned meaning to things, and she could choose not to. She found the stone anyway, right there, 3 feet from where she had been kneeling. The same loose stone, a little more weathered now, and she could see the chips before she even got close, and she counted them, in exactly half a second without meaning to. 9. Still 9. Her stride did not break. Nobody watching would have seen anything. But something in her chest went very quiet and very old for a moment, and she let it, and then she was past it, and heading toward the healing quarters, and there was work to do. The work, as always, was what made sense. The resonance sickness responded to her almost immediately, not because what she was doing was magic, but because she had spent 3 years learning to meet a pack's frequency where it actually was, rather than where the theory said it should be. She worked long hours, she slept when she had to, she drank her tea while it was hot. On the third night, Zael found her in the corridor. He had clearly been thinking about what to say. She could see it in the way he stood, a man who had prepared something and was now unsure of the terrain. He said, "I should have." She said, quietly, that she was there for the pack's health, and that his feelings about the past were his own business to manage, not hers. She said it without anger, clean and clear, the way she said everything now, and she went back inside. He stood in the corridor for a long time. She knew because she could feel him through the door. That was the thing about her particular kind of sensitivity. It was never entirely off. She could feel his uncertainty, and something underneath it that was more complicated than guilt, something that had no clean name, and she let herself feel it for exactly as long as it took to finish charting the evening's notes, and then she let it go. At 2 in the morning, she sat on the floor of the healing room with her back against the stone wall, because she was tired, and the chair was too far, and the floor was right there, and she stayed that way for a while, not crying, not spiraling, just sitting, heartbeat by heartbeat, the way she used to count the chips on a stone. She knew what this was. She let it be what it was. Then she got up. Trolda. The sickness broke on the 12th day. She felt it happen before she saw it, a collective easing in the pack's resonance, something that had been tilted for too long going level. People who had been gray-faced for weeks sat up straighter at dinner. Children who had been quiet started making noise again, which everyone pretended to find irritating and was actually deeply relieving. Zael watched it happen from the far side of the Great Hall. He watched the pack respond to Seraphine the way a field responds to rain. Not dramatically, not with ceremony, just with the simple physical relief of something that had been missing returning. He stood there for a long time and understood something that he had not understood before, which was the difference between a thing that is present and a thing that is necessary. He found her that evening in the empty throne room, which she had been using as a place to write her completion notes because it was quiet and had good light and nobody came in. He asked her to stay, not as a healer, not as a retained specialist or a court physician, or any of the carefully constructed titles his council had been suggesting for a week. He asked her to be Ironwood's queen. He said he had been revising the Omega classification codes since the second week she was here. He said the hierarchy rights were already in draft reform. He said he was not asking her to forgive anything. He was asking her to help him make sure the thing that had happened to her could not happen to anyone else, and that he understood those were 2 different requests, and only one of them was his to make. She was quiet for a long time. Then the anger came, clean and familiar, the kind she could hold steadily without it burning her. And she told him the classification revision was missing 4 key provisions. She named them. She told him the hierarchy rights reform was a good start, and also incomplete, and she would need to see the full draft before she said anything further. She said she would want a written agreement, witnessed, before she slept on any of this. He said, "Whatever you need." She looked at him, and for the first time since she had arrived, she was not assessing him, she was just looking, trying to determine something she did not entirely have words for yet, whether the thing she had buried was still there, or whether she had buried it too well, whether wanting something again was a choice she still knew how to make. She did not answer that night. 2. The documents took 4 days. She added 2 provisions of her own on the second day, and he signed them without argument. The pack gathered in the courtyard on a clear morning. She stood in the same place she had knelt 3 years ago, and they put the crown on her head, and she stood upright and still while they did it. She looked at the stone. 9 chips. She did not count them. That night, alone in her room, the process of becoming his queen was a separate negotiation for a different season. She stood at the window and felt the pack's resonance moving through the walls like a warm current, steady and deep, and she realized it was responding to her the way it always had, underneath everything, even when she was outside the gate counting stones to keep herself from falling apart. It had always known her. She put her hand flat against the stone wall. It was warm. She left it there a long time.